like to get going, being it's afternoon.
I will.
Yeah, we had to allot for the weather, give them a few minutes.
Yes, definitely. What weather? What weather? You sound like a true Michigan.
Yeah, somebody who didn't go on break.
Yeah, right.
It's like, what?
And the people that came back from break. Well, my name is Christy Bardenhagen. I'm president of the League. And I want to welcome you all here, and I'm really glad that you made the effort because it wasn't easy. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We never ever support or oppose candidates or parties. Men and women who are 16 years of age and American citizens may join the League. The Leelanau League currently has about 170 members, of which 35% are men. More information on the League may be found at our website, lwvleelanau.org. Dues are $60 a year for an individual or $90 for family membership. Membership applications can be found online at our website and also on the table right here. Before we begin, let me tell you our next public forum is at noon on Wednesday, May 2nd, and hopefully we'll be back downstairs. We'll hold part 2 of the February forum, Is Our Healthcare System Broken? Featuring Barbara Conley, MD, and Ed Dolan, PhD. They were here for the one in February, and they're coming back. Then, after the talk, we will take a 5-minute break and then have our member business meeting. Today's forum is entitled Promote the Vote, a project that secures our voting rights by putting them into the state constitution. And now I'll have Joan come up and introduce our speakers.
Sharon Delente, who is with us today, traveled up from southeastern Michigan yesterday. She joined the ACLU of Michigan as the voting rights strategist in June of 2017. She's responsible for the ACLU's work to increase citizen access to and engagement with our democracy. Sharon's an expert on voting and elections, with more than a decade of experience on the ground here in Michigan. She has extensive experience litigating civil rights cases in private practice. She obtained a law degree and a master's in public policy from the University of Michigan and a BA from Vassar College. Sharon previously served as a cooperating attorney for the ACLU of Michigan and is a board member of the Metro Detroit branch. She lives with her husband and 2 children in Detroit. And we have petitions over here, Sharon.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for coming out today to spend the morning or the midday with me. I love this size of group. I will, if you can't hear me at any point, just wave your hand a little bit like this at me, and I can definitely speak louder. I've spoken in larger rooms. I used to teach at the University of Michigan in a much larger room with no benefit of any sort of amplification. If you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to have to know how to be loud in a courtroom, right? Yes. So thank you for having me today. I know a storm can seem like a daunting and unpleasant day for travel, but I've really actually enjoyed the snow. I grew up skiing. I grew up in Pennsylvania where we get a fair amount of snow as well, and so I have really enjoyed the beauty of the area today and last night. So, and I got most of my drive there was no weather at all. It basically started once I got here, so that was good. So today we're going to talk about Promote the Vote. I want to leave time for sure for you all to ask any and all questions that you have. I'm doing a lot of different presentations, and sometimes they're 15 minutes, sometimes they're 30, sometimes they're 45. I live and breathe this stuff, so I can go on, but I think I've crafted about the right amount of time, and then we'll have an ample opportunity for questions. So why do we need Promote the Vote? What's the reason? Why are we here today? Well, I'll start with the good news. Michigan was once a leader in innovation in voting in elections. Who knows who the handsome gentleman on the right is? Richard Austin. One of the most famous secretaries of state ever, here who served in the state of Michigan, but also in the country. He was very, very well regarded. And one of the reasons he was well regarded is because he was this innovator. At that time, Michigan did a number of things, and I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail, that ended up becoming the best practice for the whole country. Things that we take for granted and expect to be a part of our voting system right now. And League members may know all this history, but most members of the public don't, so I go over it. So how was Michigan an innovator? Well, one of the first things is, who here has heard of the motor voter law, or has a kind of a concept of what motor voter might be? Okay, so motor voter is the practice that when you go to the Secretary of State or some other agencies, but most commonly the Secretary of State, they offer you the opportunity to register, okay? So that is, as long as I've had a license, for sure that has been the practice. But that wasn't always the practice. And guess what was the first state to implement motor voter? Michigan was the first state, okay? Michigan implemented it. It had extraordinary impacts on our voter registration. It brought a lot more people into the process, just as this reform does today across the country. And it was such an amazing innovation that later Congress adopted a federal law that said the entire country needs to be doing this. This is just an extraordinary best practice, and we need to have it nationwide. But that wasn't the end of Michigan's innovation. Michigan also was the first state in the country to have a voter registration database statewide. Not quite as, sort of perfect sounding. A database might not be your thing, but a database that's statewide means that when you move, as some of you may have, perhaps you lived in a different part of the state and then you moved up here, you do that transaction at the Secretary of State, it all happens very simply. That didn't used to be how it is. It used to be, I moved to Traverse City, I have to take time out of my day to make sure to go to the clerk's office to register and do this paperwork in this new community. The implementation of that statewide voter registration database was also, we were the first state in the country to have that. Recently retired Director of the Bureau of Elections, Chris Thomas, was really integrally involved in the development of that. That also became a paradigm nationwide. Congress adopted that by federal law, and the whole country had to move in that direction as well. So we have this extraordinary history of innovation. I like to start with that because I think it ties in with Michigan's sense of itself as a home of innovation, right? The home of the car, the innovation of the car, etc. But unfortunately, that's the end of our good news. Yes?
What year was the motor voter thing initiated?
I have it in my notes, but
Approximately.
I'm saying, I'm going to guess the mid-70s.
Okay.
And it was, but if anybody in here knows better than me and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was in the mid-70s implemented here in Michigan. Okay, so that's the good news, but now, not the not so good news. So Michigan has this extraordinary history of innovation in elections, but unfortunately we have fallen behind the majority of states, and I'm going to get into more detail. Again, I can give you all kinds of detail, but just as a frame, we have fallen behind in 3 key areas. Voting access, meaning how convenient and accessible is voter registration and casting a ballot. We've fallen behind in voting security, and we've fallen behind in protecting the privacy of our ballot. I'm going to talk about those all in more detail. So access to the ballot. Michigan and Mississippi are the only 2 states in the country that have failed to adopt a single reform that would increase access to the ballot. These would be reforms like online voter registration, early voting, no reason absentee voting, automatic voter registration, same-day registration, shortening the voter registration deadline, pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, and I feel like I'm forgetting one. So this isn't just one kind of reform I'm talking about. There are a variety of ways that you can modernize access to registration, just as we did with motor voter. And 48 other states have seen fit to do so. And if it's 48 other states, it's hard to say anymore that these are novel things, right? Or they're not tested. Some of these reforms that I'm talking about have been in place for 40 years, and we don't have them. Okay, so here's some illustrations of what that means. This is everything in blue or green or aqua or teal or whatever. Someone who knows those fancy words for colors. Maybe there's like a special name for this one. But this is a visual representation or a graphic representation of what that looks like to be behind the rest of the country. So all the states in blue or green have adopted no reason absentee voting or early voting. Another way to think about those two kinds of reforms, and I link them together, no reason absentee and early voting, because basically what it does is it gives citizens the freedom to choose when to cast their ballot. You have to be 18 to register. I think you're a grown-up and you're old enough to decide whether you're going to go and do it on election day or whether it's more convenient for you to do it 3 days prior. I think you can be entrusted with that decision, and the rest of the country seems to feel that way as well. Let's see. So here's another. This one it's a little hard for you to see given the orientation of the room, so let me try and describe what. This is online voter registration. So all the states in blue have online voter registration. This is as December of last year. So I don't think any states have added in the first part of this year, but it's possible. So the light blue states don't have registration at all. North Dakota doesn't have voter registration. Just let that sit with you for a second. So we have come to understand that voter registration is a critical component of the system. I think North Dakota would be offended if you suggested that their system was full of fraud and disorganization and chaos. They don't think so, right? It seems to work for them. So the dark green states have passed but not implemented online voter registration, and the light green states, which includes Michigan, don't have online voter registration. Who's been paying attention to online voter registration at all in the news? Has anyone been paying attention?
There is legislation.
Yes. So there does seem to be some movement in the Michigan legislature in the past couple weeks or month about online voter registration. So we may see some access there. But to be honest, when I said 48 states have passed at least one reform, many states have passed multiple reforms, as I'm going to show you. So just passing one really doesn't get us into even, the middle of the road average performance. All right, so here, let me explain what this is, because again, it's kind of hard to see. But I don't know that there's anything I can do with the light. So this is what I call voting rights bingo, because you have these, you have bingos in certain ways. Across the top are those kinds of different voting access reforms, okay? And down the left-hand side are a bunch of states. For someone who can read it, what is the common theme amongst those states on the left-hand side? What jumps out at you? Anything? Let me list them. Alabama, Alaska, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, and Montana. They're more conservative states. So look at all these reforms. These are all conservative states. All of these reforms have been adopted in conservative states. So you've got something like Louisiana has 4 of them. Idaho has 4 of them. Alaska has 3 of them. Montana, I've got family there. Not known as the bastion of liberal, liberal voting, access for everyone and anyone. They have 4. So I really think it's important. I think this is powerful because we, at some point around 2011 or 2012, we started thinking of voting in partisan terms. And I don't think that even matches up with the facts of what's going on the ground. I think that, maybe perhaps some individuals for certain reasons and interests want to make that the discussion, that this is another issue we can be divided over. I would say that's not so. I would say you see that a lot of the country is increasing access. we went the wrong way. Okay, so that is how Michigan is lagging behind in terms of access. Now we're moving on to election security. Michigan is lagging behind in election security. The Center for American Progress did a recent report that analyzed all 50 states and their election security. Michigan got a C. Probably in election access it would have gotten an F, so we're doing a little better in the election security. One of the key reasons why we do well is that we have retained some security features that other states dropped and went away from. And one of the most critical components of that is paper ballots. It sounds sort of weird, right? Because here I am, we're talking about innovation, but I'm holding on to paper ballots. Paper ballots are a critical record of the election. So if you have recounts, if you have challenges, if you have some problem with your tabulator machine, having those paper ballots is actually really critical. So Michigan did a good thing by never moving away from those paper ballots, and they retain them today. Some other states moved away from them and are now having to move back. My state that I grew up in, Pennsylvania, is that way. They moved away, and just like in the last 6 to 9 months, they have tossed out they're just, I forget what they're called, but the machines where you just vote on basically a machine and it doesn't produce any paper. So Michigan is good in the sense that it has that feature and that security, but it has no post-election audit. That was one of the things that the report criticized. Post-election audit is as complicated as reviewing your receipt at the restaurant before you pay the bill. When you ask for the bill, you look at it before you put your credit card down and make sure that the next table's bottle of champagne and 2 steaks are not on your bill, right? You make sure that the waiter or waitress, through no intention of their own, didn't by accident put something on there. You check it, you compare, and that is what a post-election audit is. You're not checking every single ballot. You are taking a sample and you are assessing, what did we tabulate the results, how many people got how many different votes, versus what did those paper ballots say. Right now, Michigan is not doing that. The majority of states are doing that.
Sharon?
Yes.
Who is the Center for American Progress?
It's a think tank. You can Google them online. I don't know more about them than they do reports and stuff like that. I should say that some of this election security stuff has been coming up in a lot of different contexts, right? There was those news headlines for sort of a week there of election chiefs say, or not election chiefs, intelligence chiefs say, Russia is coming after our elections. So security is something that's getting a lot more attention and concern right now, given concern about foreign interference. Okay, who knows who that guy is? Anybody know who that handsome gentleman is? No, but he played a role on a commission that Chris Kobach. So that's Chris Kobach. And the reason why I have his picture up there is shortly after I joined the ACLU was when, if you remember, Chris Kobach was appointed along with Vice President Pence to chair the Presidential Commission on Election Integrity, which has now been disbanded and had a very turbulent time period in which it was in existence. So right around when I came to the ACLU was when the Election Commission was asking states to send them data. So you may not know this, but the federal government doesn't control directly or administer our elections. And that's a good thing, because then, when we're having nationwide elections, there's not a single body sort of controlling things and potentially, manipulating things, right? So we have this decentralized system of 50 states. Then in the state of Michigan, we have a decentralized system with county clerks and then really township city clerks. So the Presidential Commission on Election Integrity asked for all this data. And on one of my first days, I was watching this, and secretaries of state in the South were saying, Chris Kobach, you can go jump in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not giving you my data. Because the privacy and the security of our election data and the importance of knowing that who I vote for is private, so that if I disagree with my spouse or my sister or my employer or my labor union, that I have the freedom to make that choice. If you take that privacy away, the whole process of voting is really undermined, right? Because if people are going to find out and I'm worried and that somehow threatens my livelihood or my family or something like that, that makes it very difficult to freely and fairly choose who you want and when you cast your ballot. So privacy is another important issue that is jeopardized in the sense that Michigan is one of only 11, if I do the opposite math there, 11 states that does not provide a right to a secret ballot in the Constitution. And I'm going to explain a little bit more what exactly that is because there is reference to secrecy in the Constitution.
So did Michigan share its voters' data?
So what happened is Michigan did what it already can do under the law, which is Michigan shares, and anybody can buy this actually for $25, the voter file, which is that statewide database that I was telling you about, which would be a file so large none of us would be able to open it or do anything with it. But if you wanted to pay $25, you could get it. And it would indicate whether or not you voted. It keeps a record of when you vote. It does not keep a record of who you voted for. And we'll talk more about the privacy component and how that's currently protected and what Promote the Vote will do. Okay, so Promote the Vote is a response to those 3 areas in which we're lagging behind. So what is it? It's a ballot initiative. What would it do? It would amend the Michigan Constitution to add certain voting rights. For those who have said, as to some ballot initiatives in the past, I don't like, putting this in the Constitution, I would say voting in elections is already in the Constitution. It's an entire section of the Constitution. This is the kind of thing that belongs in the Constitution. This is not some unrelated issue that has no place in our Constitution that is being put in. As I said, there's an entire section that covers voting in elections right now, but it doesn't cover these rights. It doesn't provide these rights. Who is doing it? Promote the Vote is a broad coalition of organizations and individuals, business leaders. We have mayors who are supporting it. We have bipartisan support, and we're continuing to grow that. If I could spend all my time just having one-on-one conversations with people and encouraging them to support it, I'd be happy to do that. So we're growing that list. We can use your help. If you look at the website, you can see there a long list of the partners. You can see for yourself. And as people sign on to get engaged in organizations and individuals and business leaders and civic leaders, we can add them to the website. So what is needed around the ballot initiative right now is signatures, right? Ballot initiatives have sort of multiple phases. The phase that we're in right now is a signature collecting phase, and we'll talk about how you can sign a petition here today. 315,654 is the exact number of valid signatures that you need, but the way it works is that you collect a whole lot more because sometimes people will sign it twice. Sometimes their handwriting wasn't clear enough, and their signature is not considered valid.
Do you know how many we have so far?
I know that we exceeded the volunteer goal for March, which only means that we have to adjust our goals and make them bigger for the next several months. And we're doing a combined paid operation and volunteer operation. Because given that we were starting in the winter months and given the time frame, it would have been risky to just do a volunteer program. So what else is needed? I just wanted to be clear that once the signature phase is done, that's not the end. Promote the Vote will have plenty of work to do. More of what I'm doing here. I was on the radio program this morning for Ron Jolly. He said, once you're on the ballot, come back up. There'll be the next phase of education and talking with voters about it.
How did they come up with that figure, 315,000?
It is a percentage of the turnout in the last gubernatorial election. So that's how you calculate it. That's why it's some weird number. Yeah?
What are the specific certain rights, the voting rights that you're...
That's what we're going to next slide.
Okay, great.
All right, so the first one is to protect the secret ballot. So as I said, the numbers earlier, 39, I think it was, sorry, I have all these different calculations for all these different reforms, and sometimes it's just safer to go with the majority of states as comfort. So the majority of states provide individual citizens in their constitutions the right to a secret ballot. They give an affirmative right to the citizens. That is not what Michigan's constitution does right now. It says the legislature is responsible for protecting your right to a secret ballot. 39 states give that right to the citizens. Michigan mentions secrecy, so good that we're paying attention to this issue, but it gives that right to the legislature to be in charge of that. We think that needs to very squarely be the right of the citizen. I can't say what's going to go on between this balance of power and interest in voting in elections between federal, state, local government, but I think now is the time to make sure that citizens feel very comfortable in the secrecy and the privacy of their ballot. So again, as I said, one of the critical pieces of the way that the ballot is kept secret is, when you go into the poll and there's that point at which you tear off the top and then you stick it in the machine. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? When you separate those two pieces, there's now no longer a way to connect you to the choices you made. So that is the critical sort of protective mechanism that when someone asks for data, there's no longer a correlation between your choices.
Sure. Then at this point, who does have access to that ballot information of who we voted for?
Because of our current system, it's okay and it's protected. It's not collated. It's not collated. That information is not. There's nobody anywhere keeping who did you vote for president, who did you vote for county commissioner, who did you vote for state rep. And once that piece gets torn off the top, it's only then that who you cast your ballot for is recorded, and now it's not connected to you.
Okay. But
So,
this would codify it as
it would make
absolutely
it right. I mean, it would if the
non-existent.
legislature wanted to change some aspect of that. Again, the power and the authority is with them right now under our Constitution, and we wanted to make sure that citizens had that power and authority. Okay, so the next one is ensure military service members and overseas voters get their ballots on time. So this group of voters struggles more than any other voters. Has anyone here had an experience of a military member or an overseas, someone who was out of the country? So these voters struggle more than any other voters to cast their ballot. And to some degree this makes sense because of the geography, right? They can't just go to the local poll, right? They have to do it through the mail, they have to do it through the system. And so there are provisions under state and federal law, but not the Constitution, that are designed to address this problem and make sure that this specific segment of voters are getting their ballots. But Promote the Vote would be one of the first sort of leading initiatives to put something into the Constitution saying these individuals deserve special protection. These individuals who are putting their lives on the line need to know that they have a way to choose who is making the decisions about putting their lives on the line, right? I mean, it seems nobody, I won't say nobody, but obviously individuals serving in our military have a huge desire to have a say in how that military is going to be controlled and guided. And so, so the second component of Promote the Vote is to ensure that they are getting their ballots on time so that they can get their ballots back in time and be counted. The next is maintaining straight party voting. So here are, let's deal with some not frequently